Welcome to Philosophy of Value Workshops number 41 of Series 7. The question for today is, how does religion, and particularly Christianity, reflect human values? Reading from one of my works, The Pursuit of Value, Chapter 3, Section 1. I previously presented problems of consciousness and I argued for their resolution in terms of value. I then explained how the key human activities of meaning, religion and ethics express values. Today I'm discussing how religion, and particularly Christianity, reflect human values. My point is that religion expresses values that provide insights into human understanding. This is because religious mythology expresses hidden ideas and values that elude conceptual thought. For example, in religious thought, God represents the believer's highest values and thereby tracks changes in value over time. And in this process, particular concepts of God represent human aspirations that have been largely hidden. Yet more crucially, these representations reveal vital clues about the enigma of human existence. Conversely, standard debates about religion often focus on its truth or falsity or degrees thereof. This is the view of the four horsemen of the new atheism: Dennett, Dawkins, Hitchens and Sam Harris. But the apprehension and understanding of religion and value require more than rationalist thinking. And in my view, and in the view of many others, the four horsemen have missed the point by focusing on literal truth. Rabbi Julia Neuberger, for example, argues that religion is more about action, fellowship, ethics and ritual. Yet mythological interpretations go back to Schleiermacher, David Strauss and Feuerbach in the 18th and 19th centuries. And Nietzsche's reading of Strauss and Feuerbach led him to give up his belief in God. In the 20th century, Bultmann, John Hick and Don Cupid advanced other non-realist interpretations of religion. I myself look at religion and Christianity as a mythological phenomenology of value. Again, this is because God represents the believer's highest value together with a whole pantheon of values. And on basic psychology, this focus of value and values can evoke a transformative experience. And no less might be expected of an explicit rather than a mythological account of value. Firstly, the development of human values in religious mythology can be illustrated in the development of moral values. Before the evolutionary animal-human transition, the fundamental rule of behaviour was might is right, and the earliest ethical principles retain the idea of might is right by kings and the powerful. Early Judaic ethics moderates power by an enforcement of rules together with an ethics of behaviour. The Christian era heralds appreciation of subjectivity and concern for intention and the intrinsic value of people. In favour today, ancient Greek ethics looked to excellence of character as a moral virtue. Modern ethics appreciates both psychological conditioning and intention, retained and developed by Kant. But social and psychological conditions have almost replaced ethics previously determined by religion. The inception, practice and demise of religion thereby illustrates the development of moral values. A more explicit development is seen from animism to polytheism to monotheism and arguably to Christianity. Animism endows the activities of animals and the movements of nature with human or supernatural qualities. Its sacred objects consists of the feared, hunted and desired, that is, the forces of nature and the beasts that are pursued. Animism has opaque capacities of self-awareness and makes unclear distinctions between mind and matter. Yet this provides the satisfactions of a oneness and unity with nature, as in the pre-fall state of Genesis. The gods of polytheism reflect particular values which take on more human-like attributes. Gods embody features such as war, death, life, love or wealth, or are humanized as in the forms of such as Apollo and Zeus. Each god comes to represent a particular value. Monotheism brought aspirations and beliefs together within a single and unified perspective. And as we said, we would expect this integration to produce tremendous intellectual and psychological satisfaction, as well as producing a unified experience of value of a certain quality, power and substance. We previously noted that David Wiggins cited value focus as one of the preconditions of meaning. And in monotheism, we can see how the idea of God is also a paradigm example of value focus. Moreover, different forms of monotheism also cater to slightly different value systems. For example, Judaism provided the concept of God as a creator and lawgiver. Islam produced an emphasis on unity, universality and transcendence. And Christianity emphasized human subjectivity, compassion and moral intention. This development implies progress, but there is a question here of what is theological, philosophical or human progress. Father Wilhelm Schmidt held that monotheism was the original idea which degenerated into other forms. Hegel used freedom as the criterion of progress, first for one tyrant, then for an elite, then for all. St. Paul takes the view that we can understand pagans, but they can't understand us. Yet this is an intuitive view of progress that we might want to make use of. This account of progressive understanding also applies to Feuerbach's psychological projection theory of religion. That is, mankind doesn't understand himself as he is, so he projects and understands himself as a being outside of himself. So mankind understands himself not as himself, but in terms of spiritual entities like God and gods. Yet Feuerbach's view that knowledge of God is self-knowledge offers another avenue for human insight. That is, God is the mystery through which mankind comes to understand the mystery of himself. And similarly, mankind's perception of God's love is thereby mankind's own self-love. But Feuerbach also claims that this projection of love and self-knowledge makes mankind an object to his God. This implies that religion demeans mankind, because the greatness of God derives from the diminishment of mankind. And value and purpose is seen as coming from God, not from their true human origins. This leads Feuerbach to view religion as something that should never have happened. Yet Feuerbach holds Christianity as the highest religion because it worships mankind's true object of value, himself. Christianity does this because God becomes man and Christ is a mythological representative of all mankind. Again, this provides the satisfaction of valuing the true object of value even if in symbolic form. Yet for Feuerbach, the next step is humanism, in recognizing mankind's true object of value. The divinity of mankind is, however, a burgeoning idea, even found in biblical references to people as gods. For example, you will be as gods, Genesis 3:5, or you are all sons of God, Galatians 3:26, or you are gods, John 10:34. What we have here are tacit and mythological representations of the divinity of mankind. That is, the idea of mankind as the highest value and the source of value. A true story also makes the point. An Oxford bishop was asked, "Do you believe in the divinity of Christ?" The bishop replied, "I wouldn't deny the divinity of any man." The point isn't blasphemous, but discovery that mankind is himself the source of his highest values. Yet we can go beyond Feuerbach to find even more insights in the idea of God. The nature of God is regarded as ineffable, but is well defined by both scripture and human aspiration. Firstly, theologians define God as a self-sufficient, necessary being, a first cause and ground of existence. Divine characteristics are also those of omniscience, omnipotence, and the supreme good. It's significant in this presentation, at least, that these are all expressions of sufficiency. Secondly, the underlying point here is that God is the believer's highest value. Yet the idea of God as the believer's highest value is almost a truism and is endorsed by people like St. Anselm, Descartes, Spinoza, Leibniz, and even Feuerbach himself. And the idea of God as the highest value makes his characteristics highly treasured aspirations. Thereby integrating these two ideas, God mythologically represents both sufficiency and highest human values. Integrating sufficiency and the highest value into one principle, we get the notion of value sufficiency. This is, of course, convenient for my own philosophical position, yet it need not be less true because of that. Following Feuerbach's lead, my additional point is then that God represents a metaphor for value sufficiency. This is a principle extruded from human experience but hidden in religious mythology. Yet this principle has been revealed by religious mythology and is now explicated explicitly by philosophical analysis as a principle of life. But although Feuerbach's work had great impact in the 19th century, it had serious limitations. Feuerbach studied under Hegel, and Friedrich Engels exclaimed, "We are all Feuerbachians." And Feuerbach's ideas were absorbed and proselytized by Marx, Freud, and Dewey. But some of the limitations or weaknesses of Feuerbach's work are that 1. His views on human consciousness and individuality are inadequate, and 2. His psychological projection theory of religion requires an error theory to explain it. Yet such is available today in, for example, the idea of the unconscious and error theories of consciousness. And religion usefully offers a paradigm illustration of the error of self-obfuscation that needs resolution. That is, religious projection and absence of an explicit notion of consciousness are prime examples of self-obfuscation. But we aren't discussing here the question of religion is true or false, or has done more harm than good. We're looking at religion as means of providing insight into the most profound human experiences. This view is expressed by Richard Holloway, outspoken former Bishop of Edinburgh. He wondered about, I quote, some of the great insights that religion has brought to humanity without discarding its more preposterous claims. Holloway goes on to say that if religion is the narrative of our childhood, and if it is true that the events of our childhood mark us for life, is it not worth continuing to explore religion for what it can teach us about the archaeology of our own souls? Unquote. It's in this way that Feuerbach's epochal insights were in part due to his appreciation of mythology. Theodor Adorno writes, myth is already enlightenment, and enlightenment reverts to mythology. That is, what we are doing here is reverting to mythology to find clues that philosophy can't provide. Religious mythology provides a way of understanding something that cannot be easily understood. And in this way, mythology offers alternative methodologies to scientifically oriented philosophy. And different methodologies express or fail to express underlying values that we're talking about. One difference of methodology and values is evident between existentialism and analytic philosophy. And it's significant that existentialism is to analytic philosophy is what Gnosticism is to religion. That is, Gnosticism and existentialism unexpectedly share similar methods, values, and aspirations. For example, in Heidegger, Dasein is thrown into the world, which is a standard phrase in Gnostic writings. Nietzsche declares the death of God, yet the Gnostic God is also absent from the world. Both Gnosticism and existentialism emphasize alienation, anxiety, dread, and forlornness in the world. Gnostics speak the mystical experience of gnosis. Existentialists seek the lived experience. Both Gnosticism and existentialism are engaging with the mystery of existence, and Sartre tells us that both are seeking the deliverance and salvation. So religion can represent long-standing aspirational values that we can consider and analyse in modern times. Yet religion not only expresses human aspirations, but some of the major problems of life. Religion is compelled to confront certain issues of life, and foremost amongst these was the issue of guilt. Freud saw guilt as the most important problem in the development of civilization, unquote. In the Judaic era, guilt was ameliorated through ritual sacrifice. The Christian story offered another answer through the God-man Jesus. Nietzsche described this as a stroke of genius on the part of Christianity. He writes, God himself makes payment to himself. God is the only being who can redeem man from what has become unredeemable for man himself. The creditor sacrifices himself for his debtor. I could add that this is because, on one religious view, man is nothing. He is bankrupt, unable to pay his debt. This is again a view of religion as an abnegation of mankind, that God is great and mankind is nothing. Nietzsche also had an ambivalent view of Christianity, decrying the religion but often praising the person of Christ. He contrasts Christianity to the master morality of heroic cultures that expresses the will to power. He regards Christianity as the slave morality, unable to affirm positive values of life. Nietzsche's argument is that the weak are unable to achieve or even aspire to the values of the strong. The values of the weak are thereby those of humility, obedience, suffering, poverty, and acceptance. But Nietzsche delivers a twist in his story about the will being repressed and turned against positive values. Firstly, the will to power is still expressed, but perversely in negative ways. Secondly, these negative impulses can't be directed externally, so are redirected inwards towards the self. This creates classic self-blame, religious guilt, and bad conscience or ressentiment, as Nietzsche calls it. But internally directed guilt has another effect of turning human beings into a new kind of creature. The former paradigm was one of I and thou, and of assuming my ways are good, yours are bad. Now a guilt opens a fissure within the self, beyond the binary I am good, you are bad, and a new moral creature is born, held in tension between guilt and self-interest. What we see here is an ambivalence of an eternal struggle of identity and value captured in mythology. The ambivalence is between God and man, I and thou, and between guilt and self-interest. And in another way, this ambivalence represents the struggle between clarity and obfuscation. The ambivalence is first expressed in the figure of God, the figures of God and man struggling for primacy in doctrinal development. Lucifer was cast into hell for the sin of pride or self-value, the supreme challenge of usurping the value of God. Then Job confronts God and asserts himself by declaring that I will maintain my ways before him. And this ambivalence culminates in the doctrine of the incarnation, with a God-man as a representative of all mankind. This is why Feuerbach regarded Christianity as the highest religion, beyond which he finds humanism. And this ambivalence continues to be expressed in modern times, when Carl Gustav Jung writes that we cannot tell whether God and the unconscious are two different entities. Jung represents the encounter with the unconscious mind as a transcendental other. Freud similarly sees the superego or alter ego as the dominant father figure of God. And Erich Fromm quotes the scripture, "You shall be as gods," as the title of his book. Fromm goes on to ask the question, what could take the place of religion in a world in which the concept of God may be dead, but in which the experiential reality behind it must live? God may or may not be dead, but the ethos that sustains the certainty of religious belief is certainly over. Science has replaced religious explanations of the physical world. Philosophy and psychology have raised questions that religion never conceived of. And modern thought has replaced the sin of religious doubt with the virtue of doubt. In this way, religion must be seen as a lost ideal which can never be recaptured. Yet we must still ask Fromm's question, what could take its place and still retain experiential reality? This is a question I take very seriously. Fromm, Nietzsche, and indeed myself regard the loss of religious belief as a real deprivation. Yet the replacement of religion requires us to consider, what is it that we are replacing, and what do we want to replace it with? As a guide to this task, I hope to have shown real insights of religious belief as well as weaknesses. Yet as I already revealed, my conclusion, reached by both mythological interpretation and philosophical analysis. That is, a certain sufficiency of value that I have not completely defined in this paper. We can see, however, that religion is overwhelmingly a system of value. That is, a system of value about mankind rather than about God. But religions don't typically have theories of value or recognize motives of meaning or purpose. This recognition would plunge them into explicit understanding, which would undermine religious reality. Yet as theorists, we can nevertheless distinguish the salient features of religious belief and experience. And then we can match these features of religion with philosophical positions, as I do below. Firstly, in religion, values are everywhere, but God is the highest value who justifies morals, meaning and purpose. Philosophically, the highest value would be posited as human subjectivity and indeed value itself. Secondly, God also provides a central focus of all values as a requirement of meaning in a coherent life. Yet the principle of value and the theory of value would provide this function of a central focus of all values. Thirdly, the idea of God also specifies qualities of value, for example, described here as sufficiency. Yet qualifications of value are possible in such as the will to truth, coherence and its relations with the world. And lastly, in Christianity, the God-man offers an increasingly explicit expression of human self-value. And going further, other clues can be gleaned from the Christian view of death and salvation or value. And beyond such clues, we can construct a theory of value and the principle of a will to value. Yet continuing the parallel with religion, the notion of value sufficiency must be tempered and qualified for two reasons. Firstly, value sufficiency can't be a maximization or quantification of value, but must entail quality. This qualification is endorsed by ethical, human, philosophical and religious insight. Secondly, human beings and their capacities are finite, subject to limitation and even degradation or error. Human beings aren't absolute spirits which can realize their wishes just by willing them. They need the supportive cognitive frameworks of ideologies like religion or philosophical theory. I have previously noted this cognitive aspect of belief and faith that enables religion to function. I've explained this relation between consciousness, cognition, experience and value in other workshops. Yet I've argued for a preference for an independent from supportive cognitive frameworks. And religion has been implicitly presented as a paradigm example of such a supporting cognitive framework. This is despite God being a focus of value, and that value is traditionally contrasted to fact and cognition. Theorists thereby often focus on unmasking factual religious error rather than its insights. But faith and belief in certain creeds are fought and died for and are a crucial aspect of religious experience. For example, we find in John's Gospel 20:31 that these things are written so that you will believe that Jesus is the Christ, God's Son, and that believing you will have life in his name. So belief is a vital feature of the religious experience that caters to the cognitive requirements of consciousness. That is, on theories of mind and psychology, ideas and beliefs are required to support emotional experiences. Belief in God, doctrine and church structures provide the cognitive support that experience requires. And in my view, this reveals a dialectic of development between value states such as cognitive frameworks. That is, on arguments made elsewhere, increasing moral fortitude or maturity requires less cognitive support. For example, a mature or resilient person can do the right thing without excessive social endorsement. Hence my position on value sufficiency, which again would require further explanation. Yet as previously noted, values, human action and experience are entangled with supporting cognitive frameworks. And it is always the case that value and value sufficiency is in a dialectical relation with cognitive structures. Yet value sufficiency is driven by a principle of value, seeking further value, the value as the will to value. In this dialectic, value seeks independence from cognitive support, which produces further value. And this value again needs support, which again seeks further value. Finally, we can return to the issue of truth or falsity of religion that we began by sidestepping. Yet as a phenomenological investigation of religion, belief has the same import as truth, and we can explain the functions of belief or faith as part of a cognitive framework. Yet I'm also largely interested in religion as a means of providing clues about human experience. In this respect, religion provides an abundance of clues about value in human life. However, the question may be asked of how the false premise of God's existence can be a basis for a philosophical inquiry. But true to a phenomenological investigation, I have not yet explicitly affirmed or denied God's existence. And God's actual existence isn't strictly relevant to a mythological search for clues. Moreover, the strictures of logic, fact and science may even be a hindrance to mythological thinking. This is because facts can actually hinder the exploration of certain ideas and values. This isn't just a mythological prerogative, but is found in existentialism and more so in postmodernism. Yet paradoxically, the will to truth is a crucial feature, driving the process of value and discovery forward. And Nietzsche viewed the will to truth in religion as the seed of its own destruction in Christianity. In conclusion, we should review some of the points and the outcomes that we have discussed. The main point was that religion provides one of the key ways in which values are expressed in the world. More specifically, God is the believer's highest value that also represents a sufficiency of value, and that Christianity mythologically represents the ultimate value of mankind himself. The idea of God also illustrates the development of and historically tracks mankind's highest value or values. Religion further illustrates the importance of ideas like cognition, focus, sufficiency, and humanity. It also provides access to an alternative methodology through an appreciation of mythology. And religion even makes a contribution in its failure to provide an explicit concept of consciousness, that is, religious projection and an absence of a notion of consciousness are prime examples of self-obfuscation. And self-obfuscation is a major characteristic that enables us to understand consciousness. Yet I must admit that this presentation of religion is self-serving in support of my own philosophical position. That is, problems of human existence must be resolved in terms of value and particular modes of value. These are sufficiencies and qualities of value in relation to cognition in the form of the dialectic. But we can end on a final note of philosophical skepticism, that is, the impulse underlying religion that we are trying to redirect might be illusory or erroneous. Then nothing could take the place of religion because there is no underlying impulse to be redirected. The whole religious experience might be constructed out of social conventions and fabricated passions. But I don't hold this view, and we aren't limited to an analysis of religious experience to guide our philosophy. We also include empirical fact, phenomenology, reason, and an analysis of morals, meaning and purpose. More specifically, consciousness and its structures produce drives and impulses that can be understood and directed. Moreover, we can have questions about what may or may not be human possibilities, and these questions themselves are sufficient to drive values and produce satisfactions. So let me have your comments and criticisms at the meeting or on websites like Zoom or meetup.com.